First of all, thank you guys for being here for Howard Days. This is, for a lot of us, it's a family reunion. And we call it that. In fact, Arlena started saying to people when they say they're coming to Howard Days, she started saying, welcome home, which I love. I think that's great. And family reunions are all the more important when we don't have someone at the family that's here. And for the last few years, we've had people who have missed Howard Days for one reason or another, whether it was Indy, who couldn't make it for COVID-related reasons, or Rusty, who couldn't make it because he forgot that his head is not a basketball. But they're here now. We're all here now. And as we have all started to gray out and become enfeebled and strange, it's important, more important than ever, that we say hi to people and tell them that we love them and that we miss them and that we value them. So this is just my way of saying that I love you and value you all. And it's my honor to be here introducing our featured guest of honor this year. He is an amazing artist. We are lucky to have him. And I am thrilled to be able to introduce Mark Wheatley to you. One of the nicest and hardest working artists in the industry. He's done an amazing array of projects, a lot of things for pulp studies, a lot of Robert E. Howard recently, which has been great. He's also very big in Edgar Rice Burroughs circles. If you guys, and I know some of you are Edgar Rice Burroughs fans because I look at you. In addition to doing all of the covers for the current, what are we calling the new editions? The ultimate editions of all of the Foundation Press titles, which again have been fantastic. And I'm just thrilled that they're all on the books, including the boxing books. He's also recently, he did the poster for Zack Snyder's Rebel Moon. Which was an amazing effort. I also, I'm not allowed to tell you what the untitled Ultraman project is, but he did some display art for that, which is going to be relayed soon. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that. And I'm really excited to hear him talk about, it will not be a audio-visual presentation right now. Instead, he's going to talk about reading is the best entertainment value. If you want the pictures, his talk tomorrow will be chock full of them. So I'm really looking forward to that too. In fact, I think we should all see those. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Mark Wheatley to the stage.
You're getting too many marks tonight. I know it's been said, but I really want to thank the Robert E. Howard Foundation and also Project Pride for everything they've done to make this possible. This is the first time I've ever attended, and it really is a very special event. I got kind of choked up sitting in Bob's writing room yesterday, and it really did choke me up to see the little stanza and the typewriter. Wish he had been able to spend more time in Cross Plains. Yeah. So I have some notes. I'm going to pull them out. I thought I'd have the ability to point out some artwork, but that didn't pan out. So I'm going to wait until tomorrow to discuss my artwork. And tonight I'm just going to talk about why I think reading is such a great value. First of all, I have to say that I was really impressed. There's a new study out that says that if you read as little as 20 to 30 minutes a day, you can extend the length of your life. Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? Plus, while you're reading, you're living all those other lives anyway, so you're multiplying your lives. So you're doing pretty good. And that's just a start. But I also think that we invest ourselves in a book. I mean, the writer may have written it, but when you're reading it, you're collaborating with the writer. it's your imagination that brings what those words were to life. And those visions you have in your mind while you're reading are unique to you. And I know everybody's had this experience, probably specifically with Howard, if you've watched a movie that's been based on anything supposedly he wrote, that it didn't reflect what you saw in your mind when you were reading the books. You were probably on some level disappointed, no matter how good the movie was, that it wasn't Howard. When you read the books, you're making your own movie in your mind. Now, I came to this idea slowly and kind of late. When I was a kid, I found Conan the Adventurer, the Lancer edition, the first one that came out, on the newsstand. I was kind of in the mood for some sort of barbarian story or something. I didn't know anything about Conan. He hadn't been on my radar until then. The previous week, I had gone in looking for a book to read along those lines, and I had picked up a book called The Labors of Hercules. And I took it home and was very disappointed because it was Hercule Poirot. So the Frank Frazetta cover sold me that I was on the right track when I picked up Conan the Adventurer. And I read that book, and most of those stories took place in my mind and were illustrated with images from my own experience. I grew up in a corner of the Great Dismal Swamp in Virginia. And, you know, I was attracted to Tarzan stories because that looked like what I was used to seeing when I would walk out my back door and wander into the woods and spend my day wandering around. I'm pretty sure, by the way, my mother thought she knew where I was. But I would hit those woods and go through the woods and get on the train tracks and go a quarter of a mile, a half a mile down the train tracks, and before long I was deep in the swamp. And that's where I'd spend my day roaming around. And, you know, one time found a strange hive that because I was a stupid kid, crawled through. Who knew what beast had actually made this thing? Yeah. But probably the two incidents I can remember that informed my vision of what I was reading when I read those stories in that Howard book. The first was that I had it out one day with my dog, Pepsi. He was a beagle. And there was one of the things you shouldn't do when you live in swampy areas is try to dig a hole and keep it dry. A foot hole deep in the ground will fill up with water in less than an hour. So I had discovered a grown-over graveyard back in the swamp, and it was pretty much forgotten. But you know, you'd see the crumbled headstones, the leaning headstones, and trees growing up next to them and everything. And this time, they weren't grown over. People had been in there and cut trees down, and the bushes had been pulled out. The whole area had been really cleaned up, and some of those headstones had been stood up. But the thing that attracted my attention was a pack of wild dogs that was making some noise and attracting the attention of my dog, and he was going over to see what was going on. I didn't think that was such a good idea, but I couldn't stop him, so instead I went with him. The dogs, okay, so this is how you bury a person in a swamp, by the way. You dig a hole as deep as you can before the water starts coming up. You put the casket in. Then you build a wooden cap around it, and then you backfill dirt over top of the wooden cap. Somebody had been buried in this old graveyard, and somebody else had come along and cleared off the dirt and pulled up the planks of the wooden cap and opened up the casket and probably robbed the corpse, but I can't guarantee that. All I know is that dogs were going after the corpse. You finished eating? Anyway, I got my dog by his collar, hauled him out of there. I could see the dogs going after the arm, pulling at it, you know. Ran back home, told my mother about it, and she was like, yeah, sure. And I said, no, really, Ma, there's some dogs going after a corpse over at the old graveyard. Yeah, sure, yeah. And so I finally got her convinced enough to go back and see it, and then called the police, and they took care of it. Then another time, my next door neighbor was a girl. I was probably about 10 years old. She was probably 9. We headed out in the swamp. Coming down a path, go around a curve, and there's a group of 4 men sitting around a huge cauldron with copper pipes coming out of the top. And there's a big fire going on, and I had no idea what this was. But those guys, they didn't like us finding them. And 2 of them picked up shotguns and came after us. And so, we were young and we were fast, and we ran faster than this guy did through a cornfield, through the woods, down the railroad track, and got back to the house, and we got away, and we were sure those guys were like right behind us. So this is the kind of experience that I brought to reading Howard. These kind of, and it fit, right? I mean, the stories, I understood the motivation and the ideas behind everything, but when I read People of the Black Circle, instead of seeing the Middle East and sand dunes and rocky crags and stuff, I'm seeing, swamp. That's how I visualized it. I glossed right over any of the details he was writing about, except just the action, right? And I'm making it look like swamp in my mind. Years later, it turns out, just a few years ago, I was approached by a television production company to develop production artwork for a proposed new miniseries based on People of the Black Circle. Now, this time, because the way I illustrate is I read to see what the author wrote, not what I'm bringing to it, but what the author wrote. So I read the story. I read the story again. I make notes. I go out and I research every little thing he said. I don't just say, well, I think I know what he's talking about there. I go out and I figure out exactly what he was talking about. And I also, because I've spent a lot of time illustrating Howard, and I've spent a lot of time illustrating Burroughs and other pulp authors as well, and they're all long gone, and they were writing 100 years ago. I try to research the period in which they were writing. And if I'm going to try to base a figure in a piece that I'm illustrating, I try to find a figure as a reference in a photograph or in film from that period. Because I've decided from my experience that people before cameras were ubiquitous and everybody can see themselves in videos or in film, they were unconscious of how they held themselves and presented themselves to the public. They were much more personable in a way. I mean, we all tend to have a public persona now, right? Everybody's taking selfies, but 100 years ago, people were very unconscious. I mean, you can see this in some of the photographs of Bob Howard, right? So all of this research, I start doing the piece for People of the Black Circle, and I'm struck because I can see the contrast in my mind from when I was a kid to when I'm doing this now, that this is the Middle East, this is Iraq, this is Afghanistan. I mean, it's a fantasy version of it, but that's really what it is. And since he was writing it 100 years ago, that was the version of that area of the world that he was imagining. So that's what I brought to the piece that I wish you could see. And tomorrow, if you come, you can see it. but it's rocky crags, and the story also contains wizards, right? They're the people of the Black Circle are wizards, and by the way, the TV show is going to be called Wizards of the Dark Circle. Those wizards, in my mind, as a kid, looked just like Merlin the Magician. But the guys that Howard described were really creepy, almost like meth addicts or something. I mean, they were really, these skinny, bald guys who just kind of, he could really write visual ideas, and this is what excites an illustrator, right? So I brought all that to the new, illustration, and that was the moment when I realized that we really do illustrate these stories ourselves. Every one of you, when you read the story, you're doing the work of the illustrator, but you're not under the orders that I'm under to make it accurate. You can adopt it and ingest it and make it part of yourself. And that's what makes it such an exciting experience to read those stories, because they become part of us. And so all of us who've been reading Howard all these years, well, he's part of us. And I can also say that until yesterday, almost everything I knew about Bob Howard, I knew from reading. Reading Mark's book, or reading the Camp's book, or anything that was ever written about the man. That's where I knew him. But yesterday, I actually learned more about him, and today I learned more about him. I got to play in his yard. I mean, it's a richer way to know him. But the most important thing is still what I got from reading. So, reading launched me on my career to be an illustrator, because I wanted to make those visions more concrete. And reading also turned me into a fan of Bob Howard, and I still am a fan of Bob Howard. I can keep reading his work. It always satisfies. And that's it, pretty much. Thank you.